it's Jessica Pettitt, and we are on chapter 1. This is specifically about the White House office. And I'm not going to lie, I did do a call for friends who would be stupid enough to talk about these chapters with me. But for this particular chapter, I hunted down a friend and I said, Anton, will you please help me with this little project? So Anton is here to talk with me, and I'm going to probably be very quiet. To talk to me about what the Heritage Foundation and the mandate of leadership in Project 2025 says specifically about the White House office. Now, the reason why Anton is who I want to talk to is that Anton has actually been there, done that, knows what's going on. I watched West Wing on Netflix because somehow I missed it in real time. So my White House office is coming from one binge watch of West Wing until the writing changed because that guy got sober or whatever. And then it became a love story, which why did do that? Anyway, so I don't even know what I'm talking about. But what's interesting to me about the White House office is that it's the one I feel like we all think we know the most about, regardless of our job. We're like, oh, yeah, White House office. But we don't know nothing. But Anton does. So, Anton, welcome. Before we even get started, what is hot on your heart that we need to get out about the White House office, these appointments, and Trump, who's being inaugurated any second now?
Yeah. The first thing I want to get off of my chest and be fully vocal about is this is an incredibly important time for all of us to pay attention. The White House is a nerve center for the United States of America.
Great way
And
to describe it.
when you have a leader and you have a group of people who have decided that they want to not just be the nerve center, but to dictate every aspect of how our government and our society and our lives run based upon their agenda, it's a big concern. And what scared me from the very beginning about Project 2025 is that every president of the United States gets to appoint 4,000 people. It's 1,000 Senate confirmed and 3,000 what they call political appointees. 4,000. But there are more than 50,000 people who work in the federal government. And what Project 2025 said out of the gate is that we want to get rid of those 50,000 people unless they pledge their loyalty to
Mhm.
the President of the United States. Now, I want to give you a quick context of what some of those career people do. They might be the person who answers the phone when your grandmother calls about her Social Security check, or it might be the person who delivers mail to your house. Now, your mailman or mailwoman, mail person, and the person who answers the phone at the Social Security Administration, they shouldn't have an agenda to a president at all. Their agenda should be to provide services to the American citizens and the people of the United States of America. That's who their loyalty should be to.
Mhm.
But we have a leader, a team, an organization, and the Heritage Foundation who says that we don't trust those 50,000 people. The people that do everything from air traffic controllers who make sure our planes don't crash when we are trying to get to one city or another. The people who literally run the infrastructure of the United States, that they should pledge their loyalty to a man who is going to be president for the next 4 years rather than doing their jobs. And that is the most dangerous thing about this because people don't understand the breadth and depth of what our government does to provide for all of us and why it's important. And there are plenty of career people. I got relatives in my family who have worked for years in the Department of Defense. They're not, political. They didn't even serve in the military. But you know what they do? They work for the Department of Defense and they run the building. Like when I mean run the building, they make sure the lights on, they make sure the trash is cleaned up, they make sure people, can get what they need at the DOD, at the Pentagon. So why does that person need to pledge their loyalty? And if they don't pledge their loyalty, why do you want to get rid of them and replace them with someone who is loyal.
Right.
That is the most dangerous thing about this to me.
Well, I don't think you're wrong. So it has certainly come up as a kind of undercurrent baseline throughout the whole thing. This sentence, and I think I say this sentence in every video: government employees should be nonpartisan civil servants that are loyal to the president's agenda. Now, I am House of Slytherin. Okay,
Hmm.
so I'm loyalty. I'm so loyal, I will walk around with bad hair before I will go get a new hairstylist. Okay, I get it.
Hmm. Hmm.
What
Hmm.
is so the pattern of hypocrisy, right, is that they mean loyal to this agenda,
Hmm.
and it's not about any continuity because the next president should also be loyal to this agenda. The next president should also be loyal to this agenda. So, like, when we throw around words like activist or autocratic, like, this is what we're talking about here.
Hmm.
If the closest parallel I can say, and then we're going to focus specifically on the White House,
Sure.
but the closest parallel I can think of is why the filibuster hasn't been gotten rid of. And we don't like the filibuster when the bad guys have it, but we like it when the good people have it. And so
Hmm.
if you get rid of it, nobody gets to use it.
Yep.
And the reason why I think that that's so important is that if you just look at what it means to have an activist in the White House,
Hmm.
there is dog whistling and virtue signaling are very, very similar. It's just your team or the other team that we're talking
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
And to appoint an activist in the White House, which is specifically what the Heritage Foundation are expecting from the president and the president's appointments, specifically inside the White House, but also across all the different departments and bureaus, because that activist is activating, like a megaphone, the president's agenda. Okay, one, gulp that down. Okay, then the other thing is that we are now going to limit the access, transparency, and communication and press access to
Hmm.
any of that agenda. Whether that is when we talked about in the communications chapter about propaganda, whether we're talking about the communication within the different departments, our immediate withdrawal from all kinds of different international councils, WTO, IMF, NATO, Paris Agreement, like, we're withdrawing from anything that allows us to communicate with others. We are becoming an insulated, isolated, autocratic, activist based agenda.
Hmm.
And technically, as a pinko commie liberal, that is scary to me because
Hmm.
I actually believe in democracy, which is asking questions, pushing buttons, figuring out what's going on, and using that voice to garner community and to garner conversation. And I think you hit the nail on the head that that is what can't occur. You can't have both of them at the same time.
Absolutely.
This lockdown is really happening, and we're in chapter one. And then
Yeah.
the rest of the chapters show how that lockdown's gonna trickle down.
Yeah. I would tell you, everybody who watches this and then watch the subsequent conversations that you have should look at it through the lens of understanding of how much of a departure from how we have run as a nation for the better part of the last 200 years. Okay. And again, every president is different. And let me qualify what I'm saying because I didn't really formally introduce myself.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Drop
um,
in Riz. Go ahead.
I'm gonna drop a little creds in it. So before I give to the main cred, I will say that I was an undergraduate history major at the University of South Carolina. So
Go
history
Cox.
is my bachelor's degree. Go Gamecocks through and through, die hard, you and I both, right? First thing is that I have a history degree. So I understand the history of our nation. I understand the history of our nation in context with other nations and the things that we brought over here from other places and the things that we didn't want anything to have from other places. That is where I got my bachelor's degree. I wasn't an honor roll student, but I did get my 2.87 GPA and I graduated from the University of South Carolina with a history degree. Part one. Part two is I'm an informal presidential historian. I've read every presidential biography, just because I love leadership. I love leadership that has impact. And if I say the five names, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Kennedy, those are five presidents who are all long dead and gone as you and I are having this conversation. But the decisions that they made as president and leaders are still having a positive ripple effect on our lives today.
Mhm.
Positive ripple effect. So a part of my leadership acumen is understanding the positive impact and the negative impact that leaders have that outlive their lives. And what has me so afraid about all of this is that this conversation around Project 2025 and the White House and all of the agencies can have a long tail negative impact to undermine our democracy, maybe even take it out wholesale, but
Mhm.
also make us numb to how it's happening right underneath our feet. And we won't
And
even see it until it's too late. So the
can I say
last,
something to that
yeah,
numb
go ahead,
thing
please do.
just real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you. I just think it's a really important piece. So the original mandate of leadership was written in 1978 in response to Carter
Yes,
being way too much of an activist in the White House. Please note the irony. Like he
yes.
put solar panels on the White House. He's talking about electric vehicles. What
Mhm,
kind of pinko commie liberal stuff is that? It set Reagan up to be the conservative Jim that he
mhm,
was in service and afterwards.
mhm,
So every Republican president since then has received a mandate of leadership, which I
mhm.
didn't even know this thing existed until it was being walked around this presidential
Yeah,
election like a
yeah,
Republican plan. And
yeah.
I was like, what is happening? Okay, so the reason why I'm bringing that up is that it states in the Project 2025 that Reagan accomplished about 50% of it. Trump in his first year of his first term, Trump accomplished 64% of it in its first year in his first term. Now,
Mhm,
why there's no citation or documentation because why would we do that? But
right.
what is important to me about what you just said about numbness is that if we look, I remember when the guy from South Carolina threw a shoe at Obama,
My
and
congressman, he yelled at him, called him a liar.
yeah, right. Sorry, verbal shoe. Right.
Yeah,
George Bush actually had the shoe. You're
yes,
correct.
yes.
Of course you're correct. When you call him a liar, like that was such a breach of decorum. Such
Departure.
a breach. You don't yell at nobody, right?
Right, right.
But if you have a president of color, we're already throwing some things out of the windows because people
Yep,
felt like they were entitled to do something. Is the rise of the
yep,
teabag movement, yada
yep,
yada yada.
yep, yep.
The 64% that has no citation whatsoever, other than Trump bragging that he did more than Reagan did.
Hmm.
I really want people to understand it's not a checklist. I mean, there's a checklist for like executive orders, but there's not a
Hmm.
checklist of like what to screw up.
Yeah.
It is how to invoke a numbness
Hmm.
where you can't be shocked by nothing anymore.
Right.
And it is silencing and closing down access.
Hmm.
That is a mission. That's what's happening. Some
Yes.
of the stuff that we're paying attention to are tactics, and I
Yes.
think they're distractions. So
Yes.
anyway, back to you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure I said that.
Yeah. So add on very quickly to that. A part of the numbness is this whole narrative, the creation around that government is bad, government doesn't work, and then they begin to dismantle pieces to make sure it's bad and to make sure it doesn't work. And then you as a citizen are frustrated because things don't work and you complain about it not working, and then it becomes a further mandate for them to get rid of it rather than fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Clinton was famous at this term, mend it, don't end it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the conservative agenda is more of end it, don't mend it. And the success of any organization is iteration, is innovation. Like things won't work. Like, I mean, Microsoft 90, Windows 95 worked well for a time, but there were things that broke. And that's why they made Windows 98 and then Windows 2000 and then Windows XP, because they iterated, they improve it. But what this agenda is focused on is not improving anything, is to destroy it, is to get rid of it. And that is the numbness that we don't see, that we think, well, because something doesn't work, we should get rid of it. We should just throw it away, or we should Why do we have that in the first place? Why does it even matter? Why do these lines exist? Why is there a barrier between the House and the Senate? And why do we have the Supreme Court over here? Like all of these things were here for a reason, for checks and balances, for to make sure things don't go awry, but they want to get rid of those boundaries. So here's
Yeah.
the last criteria of my
Okay.
credential.
Remind me to be charitable when you're done.
Yes, yes. Remind you to be charitable when you're done. So the last part of it, in addition to being a historian with my degree and reading these books for fun, and my brothers and I, we like did a deep dive on every vice president of the United States one time. I mean, literally went through every vice president. Okay. And then we looked at the ones who actually became president and why they became president and why they just had some dumb luck. Like Teddy Roosevelt had some dumb luck. He was VP and his president died within the first month of the inauguration, and that's how he became president. So we did all of these things. But the thing that will probably take me over the top for a lot of people is that in my lifetime, I've had personal life experiences with 5 US presidential administrations.
Mhm.
H.W. Bush, all the way to Donald Trump, and let's be clear, now Joe Biden's administration, at least for the next couple hours, days, or whenever you're watching this. So 6 presidents. I've been in the White House multiple times. I've met VPs. I've shaken their hands. I have a challenge coin collection that most people would die for. And some of you don't know what a challenge coin is. So you should probably Google that after you're done with this. But the big part is for 3.5 years, I worked for President Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States of America. In addition to that, I actually helped him to get elected as president of the United States, being one of his early staffers on his nascent presidential campaign when nobody gave him a chance to win. When he was 30 points down to Hillary Clinton, I literally had him riding in my car to his first event in South Carolina when he was running for president. No Secret Service, no protection, none of those things. So I've known him and Michelle Obama since early January of 2007 when he had a presidential exploratory committee. And so for 3.5 years, I worked in his administration at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where I played 2 different roles. And then for 6 months of my time in his administration, I was in the White House 4 to 5 days a week working on the Patient Protection and the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. So when it comes to the White House office, or when it comes to the executive office of the president or the Eisenhower Executive Office building, I've been inside that building more times than I could ever count. I've been into the White House more times than I could ever count. I've been there for social events. I've been there for meetings. I've been for meetings in the Oval Office. I've been in meetings in the Roosevelt Room. I've been in meetings in the East Wing. I've been in receptions at the East Wing. You name it. I've been all over that building unaccompanied by Secret Service and was able to do my job to help serve the nation and make sure we get into a better place and a better position. I've been in the Situation Room. I've been in the White House mess. I've been all over the building, working with friends and colleagues to make sure that our nation was strong and improving and better over the time that I served, which was from September of 2010 to December 31st, 2014.
Mhm. Which is why I called you, just for the record.
Yes.
I make smart choices once every decade or so. Okay, so let me
Remember,
be
one
charitable.
plug. I got one dirty plug.
Yeah,
This is my book. It's called The Presidential
presidential
Principles.
principles.
Okay. You will find stories about my experiences with Barack Obama, my stories and experiences with Bill Clinton, my stories and experiences with Dan Quayle that involved Secret Service, and it wasn't a happy one. You'll find all of those in that book. And it's the second book that I've written where I talk about the impact of presidential leadership and give people narratives of how you can be presidential in your own life if you want to have a positive impact on people.
Perfect. Thank you for the plug. And
Yes.
nobody getting paid here, might as well do some plugs.
Do some
Okay,
plug.
so I'm going to attempt to be charitable, and then we're going to start talking about the 3 main points of this chapter
Yes.
because we've talked about the office. Now let's talk about the mandate for leadership with Heritage Foundation. So here's my
Mhm.
first attempt at being charitable, and let me get through this. Don't interrupt me because I'm trying to be charitable.
Okay.
So at one point, Anton said they're trying to destroy stuff. Right now, that is not false. What they're trying to destroy is the emphasis that I believe is the point of democracy. Now, in my attempt to be charitable, what I want to focus on is that what they are focusing on is like the put your oxygen mask on first,
Yep.
right? Except they only mean a certain group of people inside of us. Don't come for me. I know. I'm trying to be charitable. So the us that looks like them, they want to put their mask on first because they are feeling silenced, oppressed, overregulated, like they
Mhm.
don't have enough business opportunities, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. So by prioritizing less regulation, they are putting in focus the free market economy.
Mhm.
They're very focused on private business. The activist part, in some ways, again, I'm trying here,
Mhm.
with it is reported by the Heritage Foundation in Project 2025 that like the incessant focus on climate and climate change and the environment and looking at racism. Like one of my favorite pieces in it is that non-discrimination is codified into law,
Mhm.
and they like that, but they are interpreting our focus on equity is picking winners and losers. And
Mhm.
they want to pick the winners and losers because they feel like they've been called losers. So
Mhm.
if we are responding, oh my God, they want to put an activist in the White House, their response is, oh my God, there have been activists in the White House and now it's
Mhm.
our turn, right?
Yeah.
The only reason why I put that out there is that if you, nobody should read this document, but you
Right.
should know what's in this document. That's why I'm doing these videos.
Yep.
My brain got stroganoffed and I did all the extra research to spare people having to read this collection of poorly written essays. But
Mhm.
but it is important to understand it's not just destroy everything we know.
Yes.
I think they would say they love America.
Mhm.
They certainly love capitalism.
Yeah.
That the Milton Friedman kind, not the like we actually
Yes.
care about things that can solve problems kind.
Yes.
So that's what they're trying to build
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Okay, the White House,
Mhm.
West Wing style, except not. So the
Yeah.
key points of this chapter. Thank you again, Stop the Coup 2025 for your fabulous summary. So three main key points. Number one, put an activist conservative White House council in place
Mhm.
because the White House council is really going to like drive what is codified and what's legal. They don't believe in guidance. It has to be law. Number two, invite outside conservative legal advice to the White House so that they can legally make this switch between like a caring, nurturing place that's welcome for the liberty and pursuit and happiness for everybody. Knock that shit off. It is profits, return on investment for the people who are wealthy enough to actually grow their own wealth.
Yeah.
Those people need to feel included. And then consider limiting mainstream press access to the White House so that this can occur quickly and undercover.
Yes.
Yikes. Can we have a collective yikes? So, some of the appointments that are coming out, right? Like we're talking about the press secretary.
Mhm.
Susie Wiles is the first woman chief of staff who oddly looks very similar to his mother. I'm just saying. He listens to her though. So I think we got some Oedipus complex situations happening, but
Could be.
that was not in the book. That's just
Right.
me.
Right.
Um, we got our appointment to the UN. We have a communications and press secretary. I already said that. The Surgeon General is technically part of this, but is also in obviously DHHS, who
Yep.
has her own supplement line. If anyone's interested, I'm sure it'll be available, mass produced soon. This is also the policy councils that I feel like some of us have heard about.
Yeah.
Think of West Wing, and they're all in that big room. The National Security Council, the National Economic Council, Domestic Policy Council, which is policy coordination as well as like advice and implementation of said policies.
Mhm.
And then we also have the vice president's role, the first lady's role. And because of your experience, I'm going to ask you a random question and you're going to break my heart. But I'm giving you permission to break my heart because I know the
Okay.
truth, but I just want to be hopeful.
Yes.
Here's my question to Anton with all this experience, then we'll get back to the stupid Heritage Foundation. Do you think there's a possibility that a White House landscaper saved all the rose bushes and they're in their yard somewhere just waiting for enough time to go by to plant the rose bushes again in the rose garden that every president that has sat in the White House has added to until Melania Trump took them all out?
I hope and pray so, because literally my first time in the White House was after the inauguration of 2009. We went back up in March, and my wife and I were let loose in the White House to just kind of hang out till the reception started. And we went out to the rose garden. The roses were not blooming at the time, but I just saw the splendor of the bushes that were there. And so if they're gone now, I pray somebody has them somewhere. And I suspect, given the people who revere history, that revere the value of what that building and its history connected to it, that they got, if not the bushes somewhere, they at least got the seeds from those to be able to replant them and grow them back at some point in time in the future. That would be my hope.
That did not break my heart. And just let's keep it going. Okay.
Yes, I'll keep
If
it
you
going.
ever if you ever learn anything different, do not tell me.
Don't tell you. Okay, I'll
Okay.
keep it to myself.
Okay. Anton, if we are talking primarily about the White House, which I will also admit I thought I knew a lot about the government,
Hmm.
and because I hadn't heard about this document, and the reason why I even started this was that my liberal news sources I felt were focusing on things that were riling up their base. My conservative news sources were focusing on very different things that were riling up their base. It's over
Hmm.
900 pages long. What is in this thing?
Hmm.
Then I realized how hard it was to get access to, and it's so cumbersomely gossipy,
Hmm.
poorly written that it is inaccessible. So I like sat down with it. We're going to do this. We're going to demystify it. We're going to talk about it. So now my brain is stroganoffed with all these other departments and bureaucracy. Can
Hmm.
we start at what I would have assumed is the main office of the government? You called it the nerve center,
Yep.
and I don't know that I would. It doesn't have the most employees or something compared to
No.
some of the other offices, but being the nerve center with terrifying, 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 the mascot of like loyal to the president's agenda, home base is coming out of this, but we're going to limit communication. Let's talk about the limiting of communication, then
Yeah.
the role of legal counsel making sure this is all okay.
Yes.
Ouch.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do both of those, and I want to add another layer to it. And this is the one that probably I'm gonna start by saying this. Um, what if the president doesn't have an agenda?
Mm. Somebody's got an agenda that he's doing.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
And we had a practice round of this because this is what we said about Dick Cheney and W. Bush, right? Is that Dick Cheney was the president and Bush was the puppet master.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the way,
Mhm.
the little kids would say, absolutely. So the president many times cares about, and when I many times I'm talking about what I'm aware of Donald Trump, there are a few things that he cares about, but there are many other things that he is open to be led in a direction by whoever is in his inner circle, or whoever feels like is going to give him the most favor, the most support, etc. So, he has a long history of being pro-choice until being pro-life could help him to get to the presidency, right?
Mhm.
So that is the first question: is his loyal to his agenda? My operative word would be, the question is, who is his? Because it
Mhm.
may not be him. It may be Stephen Miller, or it may be some other person that we don't know. They're not elected, but they have been appointed by him. So I'll context that. So let's go to the press and the communications piece.
Perfect.
One of the cornerstones of a democracy is the ability and the free exchange of ideas and information.
Mhm.
It's the ability to be able to learn from everyone and choose to make a decision around what you want, what you don't want, what you like, what you believe, and what you don't believe. What's what's the discovery of facts. Our educational
Access to
institutions,
truthful information.
correct, correct. Our educational institutions our colleges and universities are places where people discover the facts, where there's a free exchange of ideas. There's the opportunity to take a left position or a right position, a forward position, a rear position. Okay. That is a cornerstone of democracy, is being able to get whatever information you need in order to make sense of what is being shared with you and what's being presented to you, right? Well, their desire is to say, you know what? We really don't need a real press secretary. We don't need to have press briefings every week or multiple times a week. And people don't need to know what the president thinks about everything. And they don't need to know what we're doing about everything. And we will give them the information as they need to know it, how they need to know it. And for those people who like to investigate, and so the term investigative journalism is to investigate the things that they're not saying. Because information is two things. It's the things that people say, and it's also the things that they don't say. And so all of us choose words very carefully. Sometimes there's things we don't say, and we don't say them for a good reason. And other times we don't say them for a bad reason. Just like you don't want me to tell you that those bushes are not coming back. But I chose some different words, right? So investigative journalism is an important part of our democracy. But this document lays out a framework that, you know what, we don't need the press like that. As a matter of fact, anybody who would not co-sign, agree with, support, or elevate the president's agenda, they should not get access to White House communications and White House information. They should only get what we give them. And how do we give it to them? Through the president's tweets on Truth Social, or maybe the occasional statement that gets said by some other person in the White House, but you're not going to have access. And without access, you don't have information. Without information, you can't educate. Without educate, you can't make informed decisions. With the inability to make informed decisions, you begin to do what you're told, because that is the only source of information that you get from the people who are telling you.
Right. There's no questions, because there's no, like, one of the things I really respected about Obama's leadership style is he pulled people together who disagreed with him
Absolutely.
and disagreed
Absolutely.
with each other, so that you
Absolutely.
could, like, really make good decisions. What you're talking about is there is zero discussion, zero
No,
research. It is a mandate.
it is a vacuum of discussion, and it is the ideology of one or more persons that becomes the only information that we receive. And when I say one or more, I'm just be very honest. We know that Donald Trump went to the Wharton School. He tells us that all the time. He went to Wharton School, Ivy League school, which is great. But we also know that he spent most of his life in real estate and not really dabbling in a lot of other subjects. So I'm not sure of his knowledge and efficacy around vaccines, around energy policy, around trade and transportation, or about social media or the internet and how they should be regulated and any of those things, right? So without that information being coming out of his head and out of his mouth, he relies on one or two people to create the narrative of what his position is around those issues.
Right. Right.
And those one or two people will become the focal point or the fulcrum by which we get all information, if they have it their way. They have it their way. And what does this look like? I mean, it doesn't, I don't want to make you think that they're going to shut down CNN or they're going to shut down ABC. They might try to do some of those things, like taking away certain exemptions or maybe fining them if they put on any
Or
TV.
public broadcasting, NPR, they're definitely named
Yes,
because they
yes,
receive federal funding.
absolutely right.
And the reporting is not considered loyal to a conservative agenda.
Correct.
And they even had the audacity to say things like, "This is bad advice."
Right.
This, like, but mostly that was related to COVID. Same thing
Right.
happened with Voices of America.
Right. And so what they will do instead is that the press briefing room, and I've been in there several times, and it looks bigger on TV than actually what it is. It's pretty small. It's pretty old looking, but there's seats in there, and there's journalists from every national network, regional network, local network, international networks. There are reporters from all over the world who die to get the credential of a White House press, a member of the press corps. And so what happens is they begin a process of saying, okay, let's pull out the list of everybody who has had a credential in the last 5 years to cover a president. And let's see if any of them have written a negative word, an
Right.
unflattering thing about Donald Trump. And what we're going to do is to not give them White House press corps privileges. You don't get
Mhm.
to come on Air Force One. You don't get to travel with the president when he goes here. You don't get to sit in the briefing room and get the briefing update. But instead, we're going to bring in journalists who write great blog posts about how great Donald Trump is and how great his agenda is and how great things are going. And they become the sources of information around what is being said by our leaders inside of government, inside of the White House in
Mhm.
particular. And so it becomes this reinforcing cycle of you not getting factual, credible, authentic, or any information that you can triangulate by another source. So
Mhm.
you hear everything from one side.
Yeah, where I want to be really sensitive of time because we're almost out of time. But
Mm.
I sat next to someone who worked at Newsmax on a plane, and I normally don't talk to people, but there is no way I was not talking to this person. And I asked them if they. I mean, we agreed, we had a consenting to have a conversation, and they're a very nice person.
Mhm.
And I asked them what are their journalistic standards of checking sources because I would love to be able to tell people what your process is of checking your sources. And I fully asked this question knowing, right, like I already had my thoughts as a shitty question to ask.
Mhm.
And what he said was that I thought was so brilliant. And this guy is like a face on Newsmax, right? And what
Mhm.
he said was, is I'm not a journalist. I am a news actor.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, what? And he goes, yeah, as long as we're not actually saying that we are a news channel, then we are performing news.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, again, this is that shift that we're talking about what is culturally
Yes.
acceptable.
Yep.
So, by removing the credentials of people who actually do journalism, it is also the case that no one is fact checking
Correct.
any of the claims that are being made because they're the only people who even had access to the claims to begin with.
Absolutely. And it becomes the narrative and the script gets written for them. And let me give you this other example, and then we can move and talk about the counsel's office because I think that's really important. So when I worked in the president's administration, every day and definitely every week, there were talking points that got circulated. So what are the talking points that get circulated? It's an email that goes out that says, here are the top line things that the president is doing this week, what the president is thinking about this week, and what the president's position is on this issue. And so those talking points come to us as political appointees for us to read them, understand them, so we know what the president thinks about a particular policy, a particular issue, or particular circumstance that's going on that week. So if we ever to get asked, well, what does the president think about this, Anton? Well, I can say the president believes that all Americans deserve health care, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. It's a talking point. But
Right.
that's as far as it went. That only went to internal staff. We didn't send that to media people. Now, media people probably got their hands on it, but they just wanted to know the narrative of what was coming out of the president's office, right? But what will have happen now is that we'll have a press corps who gets their stories written for them by the White House
Mhm.
communications team, and then they just post the story online. I mean, it's
Right.
already happening in journalism. Like, so many newspapers have declined. They don't have a lot of resources for journalists anymore. And if you wrote a press release for your book, or if you wrote a press release for a research report that you've done, and you write the whole press release like as a story, they tend to just post it online the way that you read it, the way that you wrote it. So imagine that being for every issue that comes out of the White House and out of the administration. That's what we're going to get. Now, I'm going to pivot very quickly and tell you, you mentioned the word activist. You also mentioned the word loyal. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
there are two crucial roles inside of the White House, the nerve center, as I call it. The first crucial role is the chief of staff. The president's chief of staff They call it a chief of staff, but I will tell you in all concreteness, it's like the chief of operations. Like every CEO of a Fortune 500 company, their job is to shake hands, go to the meetings, give the presentation, be the inspirational, motivational everybody for the organization. But the COO is a person that you never know their name. It's not Walt Disney, it's his brother who built the company. It's not Mr. Kraft who built McDonald's. It's Fred Turner who built Hamburger University. These are the people's names you really don't know, but they're the ones who run the organization. The chief of staff runs the White House. And the chief of staff, the second most important person in my mind, I'll just lay it out, is the White House counsel. See, the White House counsel is the person that either makes sure that everything the president does or the office of the president does is legal and within the bounds of the law to keep us from getting in trouble, to keep us from crossing over ethical lines and other kinds of lines. That's generally their job. But when you decide that you want an activist general counsel, White House counsel, if you will, in the White House, that person, the way I read the document, that person's job is to push the limits of the law to see how much you can get away with.
How much can it bend?
How much can it bend? And if there's any ambiguity in the law, is to exploit the ambiguity.
Right. For the benefit of free markets, which frankly, I think is a great place for us to really talk about our role as citizens, right? Is that things can bend. I believe democracy is actually nimble and very flexible. If we're not paying attention, it can bend further than it should. And
Yes.
I know should is a modal verb, but we need to be paying attention to say no, too far.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we ultimately have the power. Like I tell my clients all the time is that members are the ones who are paying the dues. Now, a lot of, associations don't always get all their budgets in from dues, et cetera, et cetera. But you and I are both affiliated with fraternities or sororities,
Yep.
and undergraduate members pay way more money than I
Yes.
do as an alumni member.
Yep.
And they don't know that they have the power because of ageism.
Yep.
Right, but that's what we have to undo. And if there's any, because we have to end, but if there is a role that we need to be paying attention to, is I feel like it is safe to say, please disagree with me if you need to, but if the White House is kind of the semi-accessible face of the government to its citizenry, its residents, and to the rest of the world, and we are going to get less and less access to it, then it is our job to pay attention to everything we do have access to keep pushing that. And we need to consciously be responsible for getting access to what we need access to in order to make sure that we're not bending to a place that we'll never return from.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And we have to get really good at asking questions
mhm,
and asking questions of everybody. Like most people don't really go to the whitehouse.gov website at all. That most people have never probably typed that address in other than maybe once or twice in their life. But I will tell you that if a White House is being run well and it is being transparent and it is sharing with you, you should be able to go there and see everything that you need to know and that you want to know about our
mhm,
government, about our nation, and about our president. And if you don't see it there, if you don't see it there, those are the questions that you need to be asking. And you
yeah,
need to be
that is,
asking those questions all day, every day, and twice on
yeah.
Sunday.
What? And I mean, like, it seems so simple. And I talk to people all the time. They're like, I don't know what to do. Go to whitehouse.gov. Set a Google reminder to go once a week, find out what's going on. Once a month, find out what's going on. That is tangible, it is actionable, and it will be a way of holding people to account as more power and decisions are also being offset to local municipalities, counties, and states. You
Mhm.
could also do the same thing there and
Yep.
check and see between your local websites, your county, your state websites and then the whitehouse.gov. Is there an alignment of what's going on? Where is your local community fitting into what is being shown and shared? I think that's a
And
great tip.
great fit. Last thing I'm going to give everybody to do.
Final word. Go for it.
So a lot of people think the president has the ability to just do whatever they want. Largely, that's true. Other than the fact there is congressional oversight of every administration.
Or
So
ought to be.
there
Ought, I
ought
think
to
is the
be,
key
ought to
word.
be,
Yeah.
keyword, right? So all of us have a member of Congress. You should find out which committees your member of Congress is on. And if you have a member of Congress that is on an oversight committee for any agency or for the president's administration,
Mm-hmm.
then those same questions that you go to whitehouse.gov and you can't get an answer to, you can send a letter, communication, email, call the office of your member of Congress. Don't call my member of Congress. Call your member of Congress and say, I have a question about, can you tell me what is the president's position on this issue? What are we doing about this issue? Or what's going on with this thing here? Ask the
Yep.
question, and their
Mm-hmm.
job is to get you an answer.
And remember, there are multiple houses of representative that could be representing your state. So call yours.
Yes,
And you have two senators. That's how
yes,
that works.
yes.
They are opposing teams and sometimes they play together. But again, to what Anton said, what I believe is a fundamental part of democracy is designed checks and balances.
Absolutely.
And what we're eroding is access. If you don't know what's going on, it's pretty hard to check it. Even
Hmm.
if you agree with it, it's hard to
Hmm.
check it. And that is an imbalance of power that I don't think supports democracy.
Yeah.
Anton, thank you so much for sharing. I know we could have talked for 7,000 hours and you
You
know
sure
everything
can.
about every department, but please do not read this book. Do not read it because your brain power there's needs for other things.
Absolutely.
Um, thank you very much. And we will survive another day. Not everybody survived the first Trump presidency. It is important to remember that. But may we get through this together.
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you, Jess.